Hi, Michelle. Hi, Andy. Welcome. Welcome, everyone who is joining us through LinkedIn. Just going to take a moment to make sure that we're all connected and that we're live on the platform.
I think we are.
Yeah. Great. So just a few housekeeping to make sure that I have everyone's comments and questions coming through. If you can all drop a comment and say where you're connecting with us from. Just type the name of the city you're based in.
We are competing with Google I/O, so we know that we're asking a lot to the audience.
We are. Yeah, it's a big ask.
All right. So again, if you're just joining us, just drop the name of the city. You're okay. We have Rome. So
Well
close to
represented.
home, well represented. Where else? We are based in Rome, LA, and London. So we welcome any of you who are from around the world. Dublin,
All right.
Pavia. Hi, Danilo. All right. So I am assuming that everyone can hear me okay. We have good sound. We are ready to go. So hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar that is hosted by WordLift. I'm Claudia Krangasu, or Krangashu. I'm the CMO at WordLift, and I will be moderating this insightful conversation on how AI is transforming marketing. So I am joined today by two of the leading voices in AI and in marketing, with a great background in SEO as well, over 25 years, if I'm not mistaken, between 20 and 25 years. I've learned that you two have met at the G50 summit some time ago. So, great experience and great background. Michelle Robbins is driving strategic initiatives and intelligence at LinkedIn. And Andrea is the CEO of WordLift, the platform for AI-driven discovery, and our host, let's say, for today. Our focus for today's conversation is going to revolve around four core themes. So we're going to be covering the future of MarTech, the urgency and the timeline, what good looks like when it comes to AI in marketing, and the role of the humans in AI in marketing. We'll keep this to about 30 minutes, and we'll give everyone at the end 10 minutes for Q&A. If you have questions, please send them through. I will be monitoring the chat, and then if there's any questions that we won't have time to answer, we'll make sure that one of the speakers or someone in the team will reach out to you to get you the answers that you're after. You can also connect with us at the short link on the screen. So please, if get on that link and fill in the form. You can get access to a lot of great content that we usually share, all the events, and so much more around AI marketing. All right, so let's start with the big picture. Michelle and Andrea, from SaaS to agentic AI, where is MarTech headed?
That's a big question. And first, I see so many wonderful friends in the chat. I have to say, Christy, Tess, Celia, lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Where's MarTech headed? So I think you have to think about what problems need to be solved and how is that changing? How is the nature of the challenges that we're facing changing before you get to the solution? I think you need to look at what are the problems and what are the best tools for solving those problems.
Yeah, I mean, the transition is pretty huge. I can see also Purna connecting. Hey, a lot of friends. I think that we're moving. My impression is that we're moving into a productivity spectrum, meaning that we are starting to see more and more marketing tasks becoming led to an outcome. Whether before we have seen, marketing as an enabler of, new connection, new sales. Now we're starting to see that marketing is becoming part of a broader spectrum of tasks and activities that can be automated. That's, as far as I can see.
So productivity, and when it comes to some of the big problems and that AI in marketing is solving right now, what would you say those are, and how can leaders navigate to solving them the best that they can?
Well, I think what's interesting about the moment that we're in right now is that you've got some problems, some challenges that are, common across most organizations, right? I mean, if you look big picture, you ask a CMO, what's your biggest challenge? It's, growing the audience. It's acquiring customers, working with sales and that acquisition funnel. That's at a larger point. Everyone's trying to solve that. But then when you start breaking that down organizationally, the challenges within the organizations are going to be different across organizations. And so I think that what we see is a huge opportunity for MarTech solutions to become more bespoke. And so instead of trying to solve all problems for everyone, which is a very difficult thing to do, and so you've got some, giant SaaS platforms that are attempting to do all of that, breaking down those problems, and even within some of those SaaS platforms, breaking down the problems that can then be, customized to the different use cases and to the different businesses. And I think that's where we're going to see the leverage of agents really shine. I think that's the sweet point where now you can, have your bespoke agents solving your problems instead of adopting a piece of technology that is meant to solve this like broad swath of problems.
Yeah, I mean that's what I meant. Referring to the productivity spectrum, is that we're moving from looking at just the performance to looking at how we can optimize the existing workload, which, by the way, is increasing. I remember that the other day I was reading where Michelle, you first introduced the idea of holistic SEO and multi-channel SEO and the importance of going after channels. Now more than ever, I mean, after looking at watching Google I/O yesterday, we realized that we need to work across multiple channels. There's not just one. Can you kind of go through that and how things evolve over time? I mean.
It's interesting because I'm sort of the mind that, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I've always believed that fundamentally it's always been about building a brand, right? And the mechanisms for building a brand have always have changed, right? So the medium changes, the platforms change, but the fundamentals are that you need to be where your audience is. So wherever your audience is, whatever that channel is, that's where you need to be developing your brand. And so I've always taken that perspective. That's never just about one channel. So when we think about the number of channels and how they've increased exponentially, right? It used to be pretty simple. You were in your local newspaper or you were on TV, right? That was it. But the internet kind of broke everything open wide. And then we had apps, and then we have, all of these different, portals that are geared towards specific, unique, personas. It can be really overwhelming and really challenging. Like, how can you show up in all of those places? And I think that's, again, where AI and agents are really going to be strong, because they're going to enable you to take your marketing fundamentals and distribute those across channels.
Yeah, one thing that I'm realizing also speaking with clients is that, especially in mid-sized, large organization, there is a lot of workload on building reports. There's a lot of activities that are necessary in order for the organization to properly communicate. And a lot of that work can be realistically automated, or at least that's what we're trying to do, because of course there is a lot of value in people speaking with other people, and there is less value in doing, repetitive work where every week you have to, come up with the reports that tells the organization where are the leads coming from and what has triggered, what results. And so that's an area where I see automation playing a nice role.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that frees the people to be strategic, right? So leverage your people for their creativity and their strategy. Offload the admin to the bots, to the agents, to the AI. I mean, why would you want your best and your brightest, spending time developing reports? You want them analyzing those reports, understanding and deriving insights from, what the information is coming back and planning the next strategy.
Yeah,
So
however, I mean, yeah, go Claudia, but
to that point, Michelle, based on your experience with internal upskilling at LinkedIn, how fast do businesses really need to move right now to get their workforce ready to adopt and be successful with AI tools and agents, whether generative or just fully, agentic?
I think it's important just to start. I think you can kind of get overwhelmed if you try to think like we have to do this and then this and then this and then this. I think you just have to jump in and get your teams used to using whatever you have available internally, whatever they can safely use that it might be external, right? You don't want data leaking from your company into the LLMs, obviously. So setting up internal mechanisms where people can start leveraging and understanding how to use these models or different agents that are being developed, and where there is leverage and where there is not, right? Where is it like optimal versus where it's not? You have to experiment because it's going to be different depending, again, it goes to use cases and it goes to what your internal data looks like. So I think that companies that aren't focused on those two things, on exposing these tools to their employees and helping them learn how to use them effectively, training them up, as well as understanding the impact of what your data and documents look like, right? Because how your documents are structured, how well your documentation across your entire enterprise or business is going to be critical to really being able to leverage these things. Because, as you know, Andy, the data is everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've been that's my life, so I give it for granted that better AI comes with better data. But of course, now more than ever, it's becoming evident to organizations that if they haven't invested on connecting the data, making it available semantically, rich, and so on and so forth, of course, it gets very hard to differentiate first, because of course, how can you differentiate your brand from someone else? And then it gets very hard to use it because.
Yeah.
Truth to be told, I mean, inside an organization, you can't really use ChatGPT, in a vanilla mode. You're gonna start using something more similar to Copilot or Anthropic. But again, where is the data that it's feeding the models, or how do you train these systems? And so, yeah, there is a lot of work on the data front that's been kind of underestimated over the years.
And I do think that, yeah, as part of exposing this to your employees and helping them learn how to use it, learning how to discriminate the output is really important as well. I think I shared with you folks, an experience I had where I fed a news release. I create a PDF. All of this was internal, all within internal systems, and I asked the AI to summarize the news release, including any important statistics that were included, and it did, and it sounded great. And it absolutely made up numbers. and so I said, okay, where did you get that number from? Because I don't see that in the news release. And this was a document that I said, use this document, summarize, add points, but these models can still, they can wander, so you really need not just the capabilities and the automation and the data, but you need your staff to be trained in evaluating the output. And not just saying not just copying and pasting, basically, because huge productivity gain in me not having to summarize and decide how to, word everything in that news release. But if I had just copied and pasted that, then would have distributed wrong information across the organization, and that's you can't have that, obviously.
Michelle, that reminds me of something you've shared in one of our initial conversations, the relationship between the number of people that you need to supervise the model and sort of bless it or approve its output. Can you share a bit more around how critical it is to have the right workforce strategy based on whether you're using an AI model, an AI agent for marketing purposes or reporting purposes, or I don't know, to prevent fraud or detect fraud, right? So for different use cases, that output would have a different type of impact in a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you look at the scope of what these capabilities are at the moment, I mean, they're headed in a very, like in a year, they're going to be completely different than what we're talking about now. But right now you have, I think of it as like three different layers, right? So you have the chatbots, right? And so spinning up a chatbot internally to, summarize, a given document set or things like that, that's relatively low risk depending on what that information set is. And so this goes back to how you're structuring your documentation and how you're structuring your internal data, because even creating a Copilot chatbot to, point it at a given directory and say, using these documents, only, it could still wander. So you need subject matter experts dealing with, if they're creating these kinds of like, bots that are easy to spin up, knowledge bots, right? So you've got knowledge bots. And then you have leaning more into agents, you have bots that you could create. And I'm thinking Copilot, right? So you could create Copilot knowledge bots, but you can also create Copilot action bots that they can take action. So they can do things like, draft, emails, send emails, you can type automations through them. That's a higher risk, right? Because if they're doing something automatic, instead of just returning information that someone's going to review before moving it on, if they're generating it and then moving it on, you're going to need more time spent tuning, testing that output to make sure that any information that gets moved along automatically is still robust. And then you have, the true agentic future that is being talked about that I don't think many companies are incredibly ready for at this point. I see
I mean,
the
that's
space.
more on the hype cycle than in
It
reality.
is, right? Where you've got agents doing things with other agents and like, the human is not in the loop at all. That's extremely high risk, especially right now. So I think the opportunity that's in front of everyone is to get familiar with like the knowledge bots, get familiar with working with those, understanding how you can prompt and tune them to get output that does not vary from ground truth data. There's always going to be some variance, but you have to then assess the level of risk of that information set. But I think that's where most people should be starting. And then the next step would be then, the agents that can take actions, but you still have a human in the loop.
We were working with Microsoft now on building, some of the WordLift tooling inside Copilot in order to facilitate some marketing tasks. Because, in a knowledge graph, we store performance data, we store, documents on different websites. We can, model the data in such a way that the context is created, when the agent retrieves certain information. But the reality is that the human and training the people to use these tools, it remains, for me, the biggest challenge. Because maybe out of 10 people, we have one champion. And so my question is really, how can we, broaden the adoption of, something simple as Copilot that still requires a change of mindset, a new workflow. As you say, I mean, you don't want to do the same slide every week. But it's not common for people to jump out of the comfort zone.
So I have a question on that actually, and this one is just to build a bit on that, Andrea. We know that WordLift has a lot of experience working with enterprise clients who have adopted AI-powered solutions. And my question is, should AI deployment begin at the strategic, tactical, or the experimentation layer of a business at this moment in time, considering their setup, their data? Where should they start deploying it?
I mean, if you ask me, we always start with experimental approaches. There's no way of coming in and say, hey, we have a solution to the problems. Because first of all, the problem is unclear. Second, it's very hard to prioritize, the real business opportunities and kind of work on a use case. And then the third biggest problem is really training the teams to understand how to work with AI, which in any case is different from what they've been doing until now. And so we're trying to align as much as possible with their existing workflows. but we still struggle a lot. So there is still a lot of work to be done.
I will say at LinkedIn, it's been a priority for our organization, for everyone to have access to and to utilize and to upskill on utilizing AI. So there have been a number of programs for different teams, a lot of training, a lot of internal L&D work, as well as on our platform. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of LinkedIn learning content where people can learn how to use these different tools, Copilot as well as others. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to start dipping their toes and getting skilled or just getting familiar with. I don't know how much of a reticence of people to do that is either experience where, if you've had a bad experience with an AI, sounds like a bad relationship. If you've
Yeah,
had a
it
if you've
is
had a
kind
bad
of.
time, like, yeah, if you've done a search that returns an AI overview that is wildly incorrect, you're going to think like, oh, I can't rely on that, I'm not going to do that, right? If you've used ChatGPT and you've got some crazy response back or some inaccurate information, or it's just made stuff up, you're going to think like, oh, I can't use that, it's not reliable. And so I
Yeah.
think that that's probably a lot. I mean, when we don't hear about in the news all the amazing, incredible, successful things that comes out of the AI, all we hear about are like the crazy things that happen. But every day, really amazing things are happening. They're just not newsworthy, right? Because it's like, oh, they're working as they're supposed to work. That's a very boring story.
Yeah.
So I think that that's part of the challenge, is getting people to understand that, yes, sometimes things might be wild in these models, right? But there are ways to mitigate that, and it goes to how you're prompting, what your data sources are, what you're specifying, how you're working with the model, right? So I think it's two different things. I think it's getting people just familiar with, and then getting people to trust. I think trust is a huge component.
So, what would you say? What does good look like when it comes to integrating AI into marketing workflows today, based on what we've seen so far and the existing tools that we have?
I would suggest that good looks like you're able to more quickly deploy into the market any initiative. So whether that's a new ad campaign, whether that's a new content campaign, whatever it is that you need to deploy, the quicker that you can do that, that's what good looks like. And I think that that's really where the tools shine. They can get you. You can just be across channels more quickly. You can be across. It's almost like when there was a big shift in marketing where it's like, now you can target devices, right? It's like, that was huge for marketers, and I think that this just 10x is all of that. It just gets you there quicker, and it gets you into more channels more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, it's also really about scale. Like before, it was very hard to scale things up. Now, even within an experimental phase, you can really scale things up. I mean, once you have, defined the workflow and you have your agent ready, the data is ready, you have a validation pipeline. I think one of the most important part is like starting always with a validation, like understanding, okay, how do I evaluate if the outcome is good or not? And a lot of the experiments don't start from the testing and the evaluation, but that's something that should always be there. So scale, I think it would be my.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. I have one final question, but I wanted to remind our audience that they can submit their own questions through the comments. As you notice, we can all see them, and so we'll make sure we pick up those as well. So my final question is, if you're a business who is just starting now or at the early stages of integrating AI into their marketing workflows, what would be a lean or fast way to do that meaningfully?
That's a tough question because it kind of depends on the business you're in. And what your goals are, right? I think that you have to start with strategy. You have to have a strategy. You have to have a strategy around what problem are we solving, right? And keep it small. I would say start small. Identify, 2 to 3 big problems, big challenges, and say, okay, how can we leverage AI to, help us solve this problem, whether it's getting to a solution quicker or deploying a solution quicker or, getting into the market quicker. But I would start small. I think you have to have a strategy, you have to be able to measure it, and you have to start small.
Yeah, agree. I mean, I always start from this idea that we have to make at least a 3x impact. So looking at the business objective and try to see where is the opportunity. Can I, reduce the cost? Can I maximize the output? If I put $1, can I get $3 back because I'm optimizing this marketing campaign? And then start small, of course, and finding the people, because in the early phase, you need to have a champion that it's willing to kind of test the workflow, give you feedback, understand if the model is working properly. The other important aspect for me, as I was mentioning before, is the validation function. What is the validation function that we have in place that would make it safe for us to roll this out? So these are where to start.
Well, thank you for such a candid and strategic conversation. I am now going to pause and remind our audience that they can submit questions. So if anyone has a question for Michelle or Andrea, please go ahead and submit it now.
If there are questions, maybe there are not.
If there are questions, maybe things are, everything has been very clear. If not, I will add more questions if not, but we want to make this as tailored to everyone that is listening as possible.
It looks like no one has questions.
No questions. All right. So I have one final question. Which of these areas, tech, talent, or trust, is the hardest for companies to address?
Oof.
Wow. Save the toughest question for last, because I would say tech is not the hardest. It is, but it isn't, right? So it just depends on the maturity of the company. I mean, there are solutions out there, right? So you can get the solution for the tech. You can hire for that even. I think it's the getting the people to adopt, working that muscle. Getting the people just used to this becoming part of the new workflow. Change is hard. If people have set ways of doing things, they know their way works, they want to keep doing it that way. Change in any direction is difficult. And so I think just that is probably the most difficult. And then I would also say at a higher level, right, when you start thinking like C-level, I think trust is probably top of mind for them, because there can be a lot of risk associated.
Yeah, I mean, I would go with really with talent, because technology, it's becoming a commodity, and AI is taking over a lot of the trivial development, prototyping work, and that's, I think, terrific, because we can quickly turn ideas into realities at all levels, working with people. AI is human intensive, whether we started to think that AI is replacing human, but reality for the people using AI is that it's extremely human intensive, because you need to have a lot of feedback loops. And so having the right people working on the project, it's key, and that would build the trust, I think.
Yep. Those are great answers.
We have a question.
We have a question for Fernando. Suppose you ask the same question to a ChatGPT, Copilot, etc., twice with a difference of 10 minutes. Usually you receive a complete different answer. What is it? The question is, what is the best hotel in?
This is an SEO question or a LLMO question.
Yeah. Do you want to take that, or I can?
Go. You get started.
Because it's not, the LLMs aren't an index. And I think people are still expecting that they're interacting with a search engine, with an index that retrieves information and can reliably retrieve similar information, I would say you can come up against this problem in Google as well, or I could ask it and get different results than you would, even though we're asking the same question. And so I think it's that, but it's also understanding that it's generating a new prediction every time.
Yeah. And I think
That's just it.
it's becoming more complicated even because of memory. So every context, every user creates basically the response that is going to come in the next few days or so. So everything is hyper personalized. Now,
Yes.
what is interesting though here for this specific question is that if the question it's broad enough and then you analyze the responses on a recurring basis, the reality is that an LLM, it's a pattern matching machine, and so if you would sample it over time, you would see that there are some entities that will continually come up. If I ask what are the top sport brands, most probably I would get Nike and Adidas in most of the responses, even though the order might be different. And so yes, statistically, again, we can sample over time and we can get some idea, but there's nothing like ranking. As we were saying, so there's no way of getting the same question, the same answer.
And the sources, and the sources that it would surface for Nike and Adidas could be different every time. They could come up with Nike and Adidas, but have completely different sources each time you do that query.
That's a nightmare for marketing, though.
Yes. Well, yeah.
or an opportunity. The reality is that there is the huge opportunity of surfacing content that previously was unseen because we are hyper personalizing. And so what is the solution in the end? For the question of what is the best hotel in, it's really looking at the customer journey, because by looking at the customer journey, you want to develop the content across, a broader set of intents, and therefore improve the reliability of the information on these systems.
Well, thank you both again. Is there anything that we haven't covered today that you think it's relevant or important for our listeners that you would like to share?
Go, Michelle.
I would just say
it's anything that comes to mind.
I'd say experiment across the models, experiment with the different AIs to understand what differences you're seeing and understand the different capabilities of each of the models, because some are better at things than others, right? You might get better results for coding from one of the LLMs than you do for research, than you do for, your bespoke, need. And so I think getting familiar with all of them, understanding how they work, how they surface information, and where their strengths are.
Yeah, I'm more on the human side. So what I learned because of, while preparing for this is really that we have to help each other get out of the comfort zone and start to experiment more with these technologies and prevent from repeating the same job over and over, because there's no room for that. I mean, humans are greater than machines, and therefore we have to move on a strategic level and do things that create an impact.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Michelle, Andrea, thank you so much. Everyone who's joined us through LinkedIn today, thank you for your engagement and your support. If you want to connect with us, again, the short link is on the screen, and we will continue to invite you to the other events that we're hosting, share content. We produce a lot of thought leadership at WordLift. Andrea is one of the leading voices, and he loves to share about everything that is being built from an innovation perspective. So you would get access to a lot of really, good insights to be better prepared to navigate this world of AI in marketing and SEO. So with that, thank you for your contributions today, and wishing everyone a great rest of your day and afternoon, whatever you are in the world. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you both. Bye.
Bye-bye.